Welcome to the commentary of JB Sports Storm FM, Focus on Football, commentary of 2's Premier League pre-review show for match week number 16. I am joined by my co-host Paul James, and we'll go through all the matches from the weekend. As you can see on the screen there, those are the games we'll be going through. But first of all, good afternoon, Paul. How are you doing today, mate? You okay?
I'm good, thank you, Russ. How are you?
Yes, really good. Thank you, Paul. Thank you for joining us this afternoon to go through all of the matches from the weekend. And we'll start off with a game which took place on Saturday afternoon. You can see the scoreline on the screen. Is a shock result of the weekend, in my opinion. We'll get the thoughts of Paul's opinion as well in a moment. Well, Man United against Bournemouth, 3-0 win for Bournemouth at Old Trafford. Could have been worse for Manchester United when Ottawa had a goal disallowed for handball late on, and it went in off his arm into the back of the net, which was why he was disallowed for handball by VAR. And I must say, VAR got them on spot on, in my opinion. Paul, what did you make of the game? And is the pressure mounting now on Erik ten Hag to turn things around at Old Trafford after recent results?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a very difficult position he's in now because this kind of defeat is damaging. Now, I look at the statistics while you were talking there, Russ, and Manchester United had 69% possession, and they had 20 shots, but only 3 of them on target. Bournemouth, of course, took their chances, no doubt about that. They only had 4 shots on target and scored 3 goals, and as you mentioned, could have had a 4th, but it got disallowed. It really has been an effect for Bournemouth because they are now moving away from the relegation zone, 10 points clear from the bottom 3, but also Manchester United, in the consequence, they're slipping further and further away from the top 4. They're now 6 points behind, with Villa playing very well, Arsenal, Liverpool, all doing very well, Manchester City returning to winning ways. If Manchester United are going to be playing catch-up, so I don't know how long the board will have patience with Erik ten Hag if these sort of results continue. But for the time being, he's got a big job on his hands on Sunday for Liverpool, and that should be a very interesting game as well.
Yes, and Bournemouth been under pressure recently with performances, not some good results. 2 back-to-back wins now for them under Iraola. Their last defeat coming back at the beginning of November away to Manchester City, which you'd expect them to lose there, but then they beat Newcastle, which was a shock result as well. Beat Sheffield United, which wasn't a shock. Got a good point against Aston Villa. Beat Crystal Palace, but then beat Manchester United. So Andre Iraola, after a tricky start to the season, he's picked up some bit of form with Bournemouth and played some good football with them and coaching them into playing some really decent football at this moment in time.
Yeah, and essentially it's Luton Town next up for Bournemouth. And I have to say, depending on results going their way, they could well move ahead of Chelsea, who are down in 12th place. So it's they could leapfrog Wolverhampton, Chelsea, and Brentford, possibly even Fulham, depending on how the results go. But they're starting to do quite well at Bournemouth. They're hitting a rich vein of form, like you say.
Yes, absolutely, Paul. Absolutely, my friend. We're going to move on to another game now, which we touched upon off air briefly about the game because they took on Nottingham Forest in midweek, beat them by 5-0. They then took on London rivals West Ham, who did a fantastic performance against Spurs, coming from 1-0 down to beat Spurs at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in midweek in the London derby. Another London derby for West Ham this time around, away to Fulham this time around. But Fulham continued where they left off against Nottingham Forest and put another 5 goals past them and help boost their goal difference. 3-0 up at half time, could have been more from the highlights I've seen and from what I was listening to over the weekend. But Fulham could have had more goals than the 5 they got, and they're playing some good football, Fulham, and it's not surprising that their manager, Marco Silva, is being linked with other Premier League jobs in Nottingham Forest, should Steve Cooper get this apple, with the tremendous work that he's doing at Fulham.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. I would say it wouldn't be a good decision to leave Fulham at this time. He's obviously got job security there. He's got a team that's working for him and playing for him, and 2 back-to-back wins. This is massive for Fulham. I mean, these 2 wins has propelled them into the top 10. And looking at this, dependent on how results go, they've got West Ham ahead of them with the goal difference now that they're on. They could easily overtake West Ham if they win again and West Ham lose. So they can get within a couple of points of Brighton and Newcastle. So this is dizzy heights for Fulham now. They can realistically push for a Conference League or maybe even a Europa League place if they carry on playing like this.
And can you understand why Marco Silva is being linked with the job of Nottingham Forest, should Steve Cooper get with, especially after his work, which is not going unnoticed, shall we say? Obviously, he's not going unnoticed because Nottingham Forest are looking at him, but with the work he's been doing at Fulham, Marco Silva, can you understand why other clubs in the Premier League are looking at him?
Oh yeah, I can certainly see why. You've seen this sort of job that he's done with Fulham. You also have to remember as well, Fulham did lose Mitrovic, of course, and that was a big loss for them. But the response this season has been very, very good under the circumstances. And I think if they continue to play the type of football they've played over the last couple of games, you could be seeing Fulham push for a European place. I mean, that is very possible.
Absolutely, but the pressure could be mounting on David Moyes as well. I know some of the fans of West Ham are not happy with David Moyes' last few matches. Yes, to be Spurs, but they drew with Crystal Palace, hammered by Fulham in the last 3 matches as well. Narrowly beat Burnley 2-1. That game just beat Forest 3-2 as well. But lost to Brentford. But they beat Arsenal in the Carabao Cup. And they're doing well in Europe. But apart from that, some of their form in the Premier League, West Ham, is not very good. And you can understand why some of the pressure may be on David Moyes.
Yeah, and I think it's like that whenever whoever the Premier League manager is in most cases. Now, I think considering the start of the season that they had and some of last season, I think they've got themselves still in a pretty decent position. I mean, they're in ninth place in the table. The form apart from that 5-0 defeat, really hasn't been that bad. They've had 3 wins and a draw. Next up is Wolves, so they have a chance to repair that previous damage by Fulham. But I think the West Ham fans at the moment, as hard as this may be, Russ, I think that they should be a little bit more patient with David Moyes because he really has done a tremendous job. I mean, you have to remember, West Ham used to be very much a yo-yo club, if you like, going up, going down, going up, going down. They're now an established Premier League team under David Moyes, and they are in 9th position. So European place for them, if they pull their socks up, is probably still within a reasonable grasp as well.
Yes, absolutely, Paul, and you can understand. Well, you can also understand why with some of the performances and some of the comments Moyes has come out with in the media towards some of the West Ham fans. You may have seen I've seen a few comments which says the fans need to get behind the team a bit more when the going gets tough, which would, by all accounts, West Ham fans have always done that, and I'm not sure why David Moyes has had to come out and say stuff like that. We'll move on now to the game which you covered on the channel on Saturday evening for us, Paul, and it was a very, very good match at Villa Park. Aston Villa 1, Arsenal 0. There were some controversial moments in there. Arsenal forward levelled late on through Kai Havertz, was ruled out for handball, which I'm going to mention why that was ruled out for handball, given back some of this stuff by VAR Or also, there was some other incidents in that game as well. The challenge on Doug, by Douglas Luiz and Gabriel Jesus, and also a potential red card for Diego Carlos as well, which we'll touch upon what VAR's I'd say on those three incidents in a moment, Paul. We were covering it for the channel, obviously the Arsenal correspondent.
Mhm.
Going, what did you make to the game? And going into it, Paul, we were speaking prior to that. Me and you both couldn't call this game because of the form Aston Villa had been in. What did you make to the game? And Villa, probably for me, deserved to get all 3 points in that game.
Well, they took their chances and they definitely deserved it based on that. I know Martin Odegaard after the game felt that Arsenal deserved more from the game. Um, Arsenal did have 61.5% possession in the game and had 12 shots with 5 on target. For me, Arsenal didn't create enough. With all the possession that they had, they just didn't create enough. They were turning the ball over in the final third of the field too often. The passing was a bit wayward. And to be honest, I felt for that reason Arsenal didn't deserve more than what they got from the game. Kai Havertz's goal ruled out as it's one of them, isn't it? The VAR is going to make a call on it, and it could go one way or the other. I think when you're looking at a handball and what you consider to be a clear and obvious error or blatant handball or clear handball is very much a grey area. But they determined for that reason that that the referee's on-field decision should stand. Fair enough. For that reason, I just didn't think Arsenal felt. Not for me. I felt Villa deserved the win in the end. They took their chances. They were proficient throughout the game with Aston Villa. They defended very, very well, and in my opinion, deserved all 3 points.
Yes, we'll touch upon now the Kai Havertz disallowed goal, Paul, and Mikel Arteta after the game repeated clear and obvious in his post-match press conference. Yet, for the decision to disallow the Kai Havertz goal doesn't come into it. And this is the reason why accidental attacking handball is an automatic offence if by the goal scorer there is no subjective consideration for the referee or VAR to take into account. What I will say, Paul, it was a superb spot by Jared Gillett looking through a crowd of bodies to see that handball by Kai Havertz. That's what I will say. Give credit to the match referee on the field of play. Gillett, by some fans, and potentially I think it was Mikel Arteta as well, was accused of guessing rather than getting the praise for an excellent on-field decision. Recent controversies have eroded the trust in the match officials, and this is why it was a correct call, Paul, and I'll explain it to you and see if you can then understand why that goal was decided. I know you said it was the correct decision yourself on the day as well. I know Mike still thinks the goal should have been given or also should have had a penalty, but once he hears this, I think he'll understand why it wasn't given. So what we'll say is, after the ball was first played by Havertz, he had to catch on the upper arm, and this was too high for an handball offence. The ball then appeared to touch the arm of Kai Havertz, although there is no conclusive video evidence of that. The ball then might have brushed the hand of Cash, and this is the interesting point here, Paul. A penalty isn't going to be awarded for the ball rebounding onto the defender from close range when the arm position is where it's expected to be, not outstretched away from the body. Excuse me. Now I'm going to give you an example here of why the penalty was given against Arsenal when they took on Chelsea and why this one wasn't given. So you may remember the incident, William Saliba. The ball hit the French international from close range where he was blocking an header, and his left arm was fully extended away from his body, and that's why that one was given and this one in the weekend wasn't. The only way Cash would be penalised is for deliberate handball. It was an inadvertent touch as two players contested in close proximity. The ball then drops onto the hand of Havertz before he kicked it into the net. The ball changes direction after it touches the German's hand, and that's why VAR probably took too long trying to make sure that there was a conclusive one on that one angle. If Gullit hadn't disallowed it, VAR would have probably disallowed it. Although that season, VAR on that occasion, Salisbury failed to identify an handball offence as VAR on the 2 goals for West Ham against Fulham. This was last season. What I will say though, Paul, is if Eddie Nketiah had scored, the goal would have counted. And the reason was Havertz's accidental handball would be irrelevant, but because it was clearly scored by Havertz is why it was disallowed in the end. And I'll just go back to the Bournemouth game, and that's why Bournemouth's 4th goal through Dango Atua had to be chalked off because it hit the arm of Atua. Even though it was accidental, it hit the arm of him, and he pulled the ball in the back of the net, and that's why it was disallowed. I mean, the 4th Bournemouth goal. So I can understand why that one was disallowed.
Yeah, I've no doubt that under the terms of the rules of the game, it was disallowed, and that was the correct decision. Unfortunately, the common sense does not come into the rules of football in many occasions, and as a consequence, we have these sort of rules there's a lot of grey areas, and I think it's difficult for officials to make that kind of decision in these grey areas. So,
absolutely, Paul.
Yeah, if you imagine being a referee and you're looking at a particular incident and you're looking at, you're considering, was it deliberate? Was it accidental? Was such and such a body interfering with play or wasn't interfering with play? The referee has to make that assessment. And then they've got VAR also looking at it, trying to make the assessment as well. I just think there's a little bit too much interpretation in the game right now, in the rules, and that's contributing to perhaps some of the decisions being a little wayward, if you will.
Yes, what I will go on to now, Paul, is the Douglas Luiz on Gabriel Jesus.
Diego Carlos, you mean?
No, Luiz on the potential penalty.
Sorry, yes.
One,
yes.
and then I will go on to the Diego Carlos one after this one. So, just so people know what happened, also on the attack after the break, Jesus received a pass inside the area, turned, and Luiz made a challenge. The ball bounced up, with both players attempting to play the ball. Jesus got his foot to the ball first, then Luiz called a striker. The striker and the Brazilian striker Jesus went to ground looking for a penalty, but Gullit said no. The situation was checked by VAR. Now, there's much discussion comparing the incident in this game to one which we're going to touch upon in the Crystal Palace Liverpool game just in a few moments' time. Luiz and Jesus go to win the ball at the same time, while also Jesus gets there first and he goes to ground very easily. Not the way Aston Villa made minimal contact. It was declared by VAR as a 50-50 challenge, and that's why there was no VAR intervention. Now, we're going to go to the one which you were saying to me earlier off air. You thought also on the game during the commentary, thought Diego Carlos should have seen red. Now, 80th minute of the game, Diego Carlos tried to hold off Eddie Nketiah in the middle of the park. Play continued, but when it came to the stop, Aston Villa player was booked. But was there a case of red card for violent conduct? Leo looked straight and said no red card. This is the reason why. Gullit wasn't looking at the incident at the time, and with the yellow card being advised by his assistant, Darren Cann, not through VAR on this occasion. Carlos tried to put his arm across Eddie Nketiah and caught him in the head, but as he blocked him off. There was no elbow involved, and the Villa player didn't throw his arm. This is what VAR is saying, Paul, by the way.
Yeah. There
were a couple of camera angles available, and neither of which show the incident with clarity needed for VAR to be absolutely certain. This was an act of violent conduct, or not accidental. There was a clear example of an off-the-ball elbow in the WSL, the Women's Super League, which we do cover occasionally on the commentary of JB Sports, commentary up to Some FM Focus on Football. However, in that game, he was not spotted of the weekend, and there's no VAR in the WSL. The incident involved Arsenal as well, which saw Arsenal's Katie McCabe put an elbow on Frank Kirby off Chelsea, and that's the kind of incident you would expect VAR to pick up from there. So that is why he was not given as a red card for Diego Carlos, Paul. Do you agree with that? He's just saying there wasn't enough, the VAR wasn't certain to see to class as a act of violent conduct, not accidental from the angles I saw.
Well, then you can't be sending anybody off for pushing somebody over, which is what's been happening. We've been seeing red cards for people being shoved over. You can't send somebody off for that, Ned, because at the end of the day, it wasn't the elbow, it was the hands that pushed somebody over. So in that case, it can't be considered violent conduct under that interpretation. For me, he did swing the arm, and he caught Eddie Nketiah square in the face. So for me, I think that was a red card. Now, again, it comes down to interpretation, doesn't it? It comes down to that little grey area that is largely based on interpretation without anything specific or concrete for the official to make a decision on. And the official, I guess VAR made the decision that in this case they didn't feel it was violent conduct. But for me, he swung the arm round, and if you swing your arm round, that's enough, in my opinion. And there was definitely, you could see when he connected with Eddie Nketiah, you could see Eddie Nketiah's head jolt back. It wasn't. This was. I don't think this was. No, I think this was a red card in my mind, and the referee had missed it because he wasn't looking at it. Okay, I don't think you can really blame Jared Gillett for that. He doesn't have eyes in the back of his head, but that's what VAR is for. He got the official Darren Cann on the far side, the assistant, said, well, this may be a red card. It looks like he swung his arm around, as you mentioned in what you said there. VAR didn't think so. So you have two people who have seen the incident, one in VAR and one the assistant, and they come up with different opinions because it's a matter of interpretation.
Yes, and Darren Cann said to Jared Gillett, I think it's a yellow card offence. VAR will then have checked it, see if he should grade that yellow to a red, and decided not to bother Paul.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear you say that it was. That he said it was yellow.
Yes, she said at the start, Gillett wasn't looking at the incident at the time it happened, with the yellow card being advised by his assistant Darren Cann and not through the VAR.
Oh, okay, right, okay. Well, again, I still disagree. I think it was a red offence. If you're basing it on what we've seen for sendings off this season, I would say that it was red, but there it is. That's just, again, it's a matter of interpretation, isn't it?
And a matter of opinion as well, Paul.
Yeah.
Next up then, Paul, we're going to switch our attentions to another game which has been a good match to watch. We watched a little bit of this yesterday. Luton Town against Manchester City. I watched it back on Monday afternoon because I decided to watch another game Sunday afternoon when this game was being played, which I'll give my full thoughts on that game I watched a little bit later on in the programme. Well, Luton 1, Man City 2. Luton, for me, missed Chio Benny. I think his excuse me. I think Chio Benny's performances in recent games, especially against Arsenal, caused Arsenal a lot of problems, and I think would have caused Man City a lot of problems as well. Elijah Adebayo put Luton in front on the stroke of half time, but 2 goals in 3 minutes through Bernardo Silva and Jack Grealish turned it around and then forced Man City to close the gap on Arsenal to just 3 points now, Paul. And it was a very good result for City in the end.
Yeah, in the end, they got the job done. I mean, I'm just looking at the statistics now. 65.3% possession for Manchester City. With all that possession, they managed to get 18 shots away, but only 6 was on target. That's only 33.33% of their shots hitting the target. Clearly, they were missing Haaland. But looking at Luton, they did manage to take their chances. They only had 2 on target, and of course, they scored with one of them. So it's quite unlucky for Luton. I felt that they worked hard. I mean, I think if most people were predicting that the score for that game, they would not have predicted 2-1 City. It might have been more 3-0 City or 4 or even 5. Luton, I think, are starting to look like a team that may be able to try to keep themselves in the division and fight for that. I think they've got a better chance of doing that, certainly, than Sheffield United or Burnley. But they've been, I think they were a little bit unlucky, Luton, but Manchester City showing what it takes to be champions by turning that around and winning in a difficult situation. Luton isn't an easy place to go and play. And City falling behind, managed to get themselves back into it with a couple of good goals. So that's helped them. And in terms of the table, as you said, they're within 3 points of Arsenal, but still 4 away from Liverpool and still 2 away from Aston Villa as well. So I think it might be interesting to see how the weekend goes. They've got Palace, Villa have got Brentford, and Arsenal have Brighton. Liverpool obviously having the match against Manchester United, which you could, is a derby really. And given the history between those two teams, I think the form book goes out the window, and it's a question of who wants it most on the day, really.
Yes, absolutely, Paul, absolutely. My friend, we're going to keep on Sunday's action now and speak about the game which took place at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and Spurs. Are they now back? A couple of bad results for them in recent weeks. We'll go up against a Newcastle side who back-to-back defeats for them for the first time in quite a while. And 2 and 3 mistakes in his last 3 matches, which have been punished, and he's been punished for them by Kieran Trippier, as Newcastle were beat convincingly 4-1 by Tottenham Hotspur. Destiny Udogie, Richarlison with 2, and Son with a penalty for Spurs. Joel Linton with a consolation goal for Newcastle. Is the wheel starting to come off Newcastle now, looking like they could be heading out to the Champions League and potentially slipping down the table now, Paul? What's your thoughts?
Well, it was an absolute rout, wasn't it? Richarlison got 2 goals as well. Son Heung-min with the penalty, of course, and also getting an assist on one of Richarlison's goal and the goal by Destiny Udogie. I'll be honest with you, Spurs, I don't want to say that they're back, but they obviously had put together a wonderful performance. Good result, 4-1 against a good Newcastle team. And looking at the statistics as well, 23 shots on goal, 12 of them on target. I mean, that is over the 50% ratio. Just to confirm that exactly, that is, that's 52% of their shots on target. Now, they could have possibly had 5 or 6, to be honest. And Newcastle, I think they're in a spot of bother. And I do begin to wonder, as you say, they're heading out of the Champions League. They need a result against Milan. They need to beat Milan, and they need a favour from Dortmund to at least prevent Paris Saint-Germain from winning. If Newcastle win and Paris Saint-Germain are unable to beat Dortmund, then Newcastle will go through. But at the moment, if they lose to Milan, Newcastle could be out of Europe altogether. Like, they wouldn't even go into the Europa League. And looking at the effects on the Premier League, they are down to 7th place right now. Another bad result against an informed Fulham team could find Newcastle dropping almost out of the top 10. They drop down to 9th if West Ham win as well. And if Brighton can pick up a point against Arsenal, that's a tough ask, I know, but they could find themselves dropping down closer to 10th position when at one time this season, they look like they may even challenge for the title. So then you begin to ask the questions is, how patient will the ownership be with Eddie Howe?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm sure a couple of friends of the channel, Jack Cunningham and Liam Busby, will be interested to hear their thoughts on your take there on Nukes, especially with the ownership situation with Eddie Howe, see how long they think the owner will stay with Eddie Howe, or whether they'll get rid, depending how the next few matches go. If you're listening to this, Jack and Liam, please do let us know in the comments your thoughts on that situation. Now we're going to take a quick break and tell you what's coming up on the channel in the near future. And coming up on the Commentary Hub 2, focus on football, and my personal Twitch channel of the week on Friday evening, we have got a game taking place on Trentside as Nottingham Forest, down by the River Trent, welcome Tottenham Hotspur to the stadium. Steve Cooper under pressure up against Ange Postecoglou, who's beginning to find himself not as much under pressure as Steve Cooper is. The point which we'll touch upon in a few moments' time against Wolves has saved Cooper's job for now, but it'll be interesting to see how that goes down by the banks of the River Trent. Join Paul James for that one from 7:55 over on the Commentary Hub for that one. Commentary Hub 2, Storm, potentially for the Storm FM, also focus on football, and also my personal Twitch channel as well. You can hear it over there if you're an avid listener to Twitch. Right, let's get back to the action. And before we do that, Paul, that game on Friday evening is one that no one wants to miss, really, do they?
No, that's going to be a very interesting game. And I think with the pressure that Steve Cooper may or may not be under at the moment, depending on how patient Marinakis wants to be with Steve Cooper, what I do know is that Steve Cooper's dedication to Forest, you can't help but be on his side. He obviously understands everything that's going on at the City Ground right now, his commitment to the club, to the city. It's the love of the fans. I don't think I've ever seen the Forest fans, have such a close relationship with the manager as perhaps since Brian Clough. This is definitely you can't help but be on his side, and I know he's got a definite tough match coming up against Tottenham Hotspur. Ange Postecoglou has got Spurs back to winning ways with that 4-1 win over Newcastle. So I think it'll be a really interesting match, and I'm looking forward to covering it.
Yes, don't forget Paul James will be a man on the mic for that one. Make sure you tune in to give Paul all your support from 7:55 GMT at about 8 p.m. UK kickoff time for that one there. Right. We're now going to move on to a game which took place on Saturday afternoon and lunchtime at Selhurst Park. Crystal Palace took on Liverpool, and Liverpool came from a goal behind to win this game. And there was some controversial moments in this one as well, Paul. I'll just read some of the controversial moments from VAR first, Paul, and get your thoughts on the game. And get your thoughts on this one here as well, these VAR incidents as well. A couple of VAR incidents here. Williams challenged Walter Endo in the 29th minute. Andy Medley didn't give a foul. He held his whistle for advantage, and then Endo handled the ball as it went to ground. Edward ran through and ball down by Virgil van Dijk. The referee, Andy Medley, pointed to the spot and gave Crystal Palace a penalty. VAR checked it and overturned it because of a foul in the build-up by Will Hughes, which knocked Endo to the ground. So that's why it was disallowed. Last season, independent key match incidents panel ruled that VAR was wrong to intervene to disallow a goal for Arsenal against Man United. It was a similar incident when Odegaard challenged into the back of Christian Eriksen. So there was that one which wasn't given, Paul, but then there was one that was given, and it was scored by Jean-Philippe Mateta in the 53rd minute. Well, it was scored in the 57th minute. It was given in the fifth. The game was in the 53rd minute when it happened. Mateta moved to meet the ball inside the area, got there first, but was called by Yao Kwanzaa. And Madley waved it away, but VAR began to check it straight away. Penalty was given and was scored by Jean-Philippe Mateta to give Crystal Palace the lead. And what I will say, Paul, is this. If the incident involving Jesus and Luis wasn't in VAR intervention, what made this one so different? Because it's all about What makes it so different? Do you think what makes it a bit different here, Paul, or do you want to continue?
Well, I think you should continue on this one, Ross, because I'm interested in the thoughts because I've got a big issue with the consistency, and I know why we have this issue with consistency, with the fact that so much of it is up for interpretation. So there's always going to be that lack of consistency. But I'm interested in what your view is on that.
Yeah, so this is the VAR view, and it's all about the way Kwanzaa makes a challenge and how he brings down Mateta. Every challenge has to be considered on merits. So, for example, if X is a spot kick, Kwanzaa on Mateta, it doesn't mean Louise on Jesus should be 2. So the referee didn't give it. The referee had seen 2 players coming together, but not in the nature of contact, as he was on the blind side of both himself and the assistant. Kwanzaa makes contact across Mateta with his right knee into the left thigh, for then also kicking his right calf. Mateta had no chance of remaining on his feet from the tackle, so a penalty was the correct outcome in the review. The Jesus incident, which we touched upon earlier, didn't have the same level of impact from the defender upon attacker. While the first review took Madley some time at the monitor, he quickly accepted this one as a penalty. The first time, and I'll tell you this, which is probably going to shock you, the viewers at home saw 31 replays.
31 replays. You looked at 31 replays. How long?
Yeah, that was for the That was for the first penalty, which wasn't given on use on Endo. On Endo, with 31 reviews, and it was, I think it was for nearly around about 3 minutes or so before the referee come to a decision on that one, not to give a penalty, to overturn the penalty decision, having seen it on the screen, and he saw, and he looked at it. I think he looked at it at the screen for 26 times.
Wow. Let's see then again. Let's go
But
back.
during that period as well, Paul, which is the second one, which was a penalty, which was given as a penalty. He goes on to say if Palace had scored during that time, their goal would have counted and the VAR review would have been VAR review cancelled. But if Liverpool had scored, their goal had been disallowed and the spot kick would have been awarded. This happened once before in the Premier League. In the 2020-21 season, when Bournemouth scored at Burnley, well, the play was pulled back for a penalty to the home team.
Yeah, I remember it well. I do remember it well. Again, though, can I just say, though, if you have to look at something like 21 or 22 or 23 times, is it really clear and obvious?
That's what a lot of people have said, Paul. If you've got to look at that time and you've done, say, 31 times, that is where the clear and obvious issue comes into it.
Yeah.
And also, you mentioned about consistency as well, and I can understand why Jesus wasn't given, and that was because of the amount of contact that was made. But if similar contact was made in both incidents, then I know it's different VAR and different match officials, but both those games should have had the penalties awarded. But if they're different types of contact, I can see why he wasn't given. One was given and one wasn't, because of the type of the contact it was, which I've explained there on that situation, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, you got to look at those two, and again, it's down to interpretation, isn't it? If you're looking at VAR, you're looking at how much contact is made, and you're basically saying, and this is the point, and I hate to micromanage this and labour on this point, but what you're basically saying is how much contact there is needed to trip the attacker over, to bring him down. So whether you're looking at tripping the attacker, but that's another question. Then we have to go even deeper. Let's delve even deeper. If there's enough contact but if you feel there's enough contact to put the striker off, for example, So, in other words, he stumbles, but he doesn't go over. Shouldn't that also be given a penalty if that's the case? Because
Yes, for me, Paul, it should.
yeah,
For me, it should, Paul.
yeah. So there's so
I've
many.
seen it plenty of times in the Premier League over the past couple of seasons. In Leeds, some of Leeds games, there were. I'm not sure can't remember which Leeds player it was, so I'm just going to use Bamford as an example. Bamford was clipped. He stayed on his feet. Got a strike away. Well, the strike went wide. No penalty was given because he got the strike away. But in an incident like this, an incident still happened, and a penalty was given. And I've seen other games where there's an incident where, similar to a Bamford one last season, where he managed to still get a strike away and go wide, he gets brought back for a penalty. Even VAR brings him back for a penalty, even though the strike's been given away. So what's the difference with that as well?
Well, this is the thing, and that's another level, isn't it? When we're talking about interpretation, each one has a different level, and then you have to go deeper, and the deeper you go, the further down the rabbit hole you go in terms of interpretation. And I think that this is the reason, in my mind, why VAR is not being effective right now. I know a lot of people have said, it's a competency of the officials. We could do a lot better. And I agree. There is definitely some, there's been some issues there where very clear and obvious errors have been made and not being picked up by VAR. But I think the vast majority of them are really down to the interpretation of the official. And when you look at it, you're saying to yourself, well, okay, let's take Jesus, for example, and Luis. Now, I'm not going to use the exact incident that happened on Saturday, but bear with me. If Luis tackles Jesus in the penalty area and Jesus goes down, what you're saying, based on what VAR have said there, is that they have to make a determination on whether there was enough contact to trip a person up who is running. Now, remember, it's well-known fact that when you're running versus walking, it is easier to trip somebody up when they're running than it is when they're walking. So the interpretation of what contact is made is then based on the official's professional opinion. And if you ask 12 referees and show them that incident, you may get 7 in favour of a penalty and 5 not, or 8 in favour of it not being a penalty and 4 in favour of it being a penalty. Either way, you're not going to get real true consistency because it's based on the interpretation of whether or not there's enough contact to bring
Absolutely
down. Yeah.
We're going to move on now, Paul, to another game which took place on Saturday afternoon. It came at Bramall Lane, where Chris Wilder got his first winners, returning to Sheffield United's manager by beating Brentford by a goal to nil. It was a fantastic goal from McAtee in first half stoppage time, but he shouldn't have been just the 1-0. Sheffield United could have had quite a lot more goals in that game if it wasn't for fantastic defensive play and goalkeeping from Brentford. Sheffield United were very, very good in this game.
Yeah, I'm really happy for Chris Wilder as well, by the way, because he's another one that I've spoken about last week, where I said it's so great to see somebody who is loyal to the club as a manager, and the club are obviously showing that Wilder's some loyalty too. So, you can't help but back that person and hope they're successful. And I think the same thing applies with Chris Wilder. So I'm very happy for him. I'm glad he got the win and a good start for him now. That's 1 defeat and 1 win. That's certainly better than what Sheffield United have really had in terms of a ratio this season. Looking at the performance, the statistics at least, the Brentford seem to have had the most possession with 59.8%. But everything else was fairly similar. Shots, 10-9 in favour of Brentford. They each had a shot on goal, 4 shots on target. But very close. Even Stevens' corners the same. Touches on the ball a little bit higher for Brentford, of course. But passing 334 to 489. So it was, the statistics indicate a close game, but I suppose, again, the statistics don't line up who had the better chances on the day. But I think, regardless of whether or not they should have had more, I think Chris Wilder will be delighted with that result because Brentford are a good, hard team.
Yes, and you were actually speaking after the game, and I'll just read you a couple of these quotes. Here he says, he said, "You have to enjoy days like today." This is Sheffield United boss Chris Wilder speaking on Saturday. "The key is to have more of these days like today. It's all about small steps. Everybody played their part." He goes on to say, since he arrived, they've had 2 days training. We were a bit off in the first half. Is that because of what they did on Wednesday against Liverpool? Possibly. We possibly should have put the game to bed before the end. This is a day to be celebrated, and then we move on to Chelsea, which is next Saturday, he went on to say. So that's just some of the quotes from Chris Wilder after the game with Sheffield United as they beat Brentford by 1-0 at Bramall Lane. Next up, we're going to move on to a game which took place at the Goodison Park, on Sunday afternoon, which I saw. It was a well-deserved victory in the end for Everton. They played absolutely fantastically against Chelsea. They could have had more than just the 2 goals that they needed. Dobbin, who scored the second goal, and the well-taken goal from Dobbin as well, was voted for player of the match by some fans online on one of the websites I've just looked on here. Chelsea were very, very poor in the game, and Chelsea had more shots overall and had more possession, but more shots on target came from Everton, and Everton only had 28% of possession, Paul, but still managed to get the win. And I thought Everton, yes, I know they've lost 10 points, and since they've won the last 3 games now, but I thought Everton were well worthy of that win against Chelsea. Chelsea look very, very short of ideas, and you can tell how bad some of the Chelsea players were with their player of the match, averaging a 4.64 average rating for the player of the match. And the highest one was Cole Palmer, with the lowest, Nicholas Jackson, with 2.77 as well. The other player of the match was Lewis Dobbin of Everton, who scored that second goal with a 7.99 average rating for the player of the match. And his second goal was well taken, and one which ensured a victory for Sean Dyche's men. And what a remarkable job Sean Dyche is doing. If it wasn't for those 10-point deduction, they would be sitting on 23 points and in 10th, and they'd be 3 points behind Newcastle in 7th in the Europa League spot and 4 behind Manchester United. So what a remarkable job Sean Dyche is doing at Everton despite their 10-point deduction, Paul.
Oh, he's an amazing manager, but he's always good at that. Has been Sean Dyche. What he did at Burnley was incredible. You have to remember he goes back to the very basics of English football, 4-4-2. He goes back to try to create a solid defence, and that's the key to Premier League survival. I'm of the firm belief that if you've got a good defence and a decent keeper, that is the best way to survive in the Premier League. You see Burnley are struggling right now. Look at them defensively. 34 goals conceded. Sheffield United, 41 goals conceded. Luton, 32 goals conceded. And guess where the 3 of them are? In the bottom 3. Look at Everton. They've conceded 20 goals. That's it. Now, no other team outside of the top 3 have conceded less than 20 goals. So take a look at Everton. Now, I want to emphasise this point very clearly. Everton, 17th place, 4 points outside of the top of the bottom 3, 20 goals conceded. Forest, 28, Palace, 23, Bournemouth, 30, Wolves, 26, Chelsea, 26, Brentford, 22, Fulham, 26, West Ham, 30, Brighton, 28, 21 Newcastle, 21 Manchester United, even Spurs, 23. Even Aston Villa have conceded 20. but Manchester City 18 and 15 for Arsenal and Liverpool. But you see the point I'm trying to make. Everton are winning and they're not conceding goals. So they're doing very, very well, and they're going to move up the table if Sean Dyche can continue to get them to play like that. And obviously, I think the 10 points deduction has brought a us versus them mentality, or us versus the world mentality, to spur Everton on. And well, it's working out very well for them right now.
It is, Paul, and you can tell the togetherness at Goodison Park within the squad. And it's like they're saying, yeah, you may have took 10 points off us, but we'll show you, we'll still stay up. We'll show that fighting spirit. Everyone thought we gave that 10 points deduction, took off them, and then end up being relegated or probably bottom of the table by now. But they're showing some really good resilience, Everton, and showing that really good togetherness, which teams need in these sort of situations.
Mm.
We'll now move on to the game in Molineux, which going into this was pressure building on Steve Cooper and Nottingham Forest. 1-1 draw for his side. Harry Toffler with a fantastic header to give Forest the lead. His first, and believe it or not, Paul, that was his first goal for the club as well, from Harry Toffler, the left back.
Yeah.
And it was a good stride though by Mateus Cunha. Good low driven effort for Forest to be pegged back. Sarabi with the assist there. Nico Williams with a fantastic assist for Harry Toffler's side. Pressure eased a little bit on Steve Cooper after that 1-1 draw. Speaking after the game at the weekend on TV, Cooper said, "I'm proud of the team, to be honest. It's a game we should have won in terms of chances. If we're to look at the game in isolation, you wouldn't see it's more of a satisfactory day in terms of performance and a point on the road. We're disappointed and frustrated we haven't won, but equally we're satisfied with the performance." Then you get the context of stopping the losing run, of some of the noise that's been around, definitely hasn't come from into the training ground, and my head. We're too together to let outside influence get involved as well. He was also asked if we had any conversation with the Forest ownership about his future. Cooper said, "I don't think about that. I can only tell you how I generally feel. The greater good of this football club is always important to me, and the only thing in my head since Fulham was, how do we play well at Wolves? How do we get a result? Nothing else has entered my head. Anyone's situation, including mine, is irrelevant." And that's a good mindset to have from Steve Cooper, with the pressure building on him at that moment, especially with how Nottingham Forest have been playing recently, how angry the board has been recently. But to get that pressure relieved a little bit after that draw must mean the world to Steve Cooper and to Nottingham Forest fans who thought they would lose their manager after Fulham in midweek, and then potentially after Wolves if they got another battering.
Yeah, I think again you just can't help but be on his side. He's committed to the cause at Forest, and well, he's done a wonderful job there. That valuable point away at Wolves now sets them up for a tougher challenge on Friday night against Spurs. But I think Nottingham Forest can turn this around. I don't see them in a relegation fight at the end of the year. If they can start to pick up some form now, especially over Christmas, that crucial run of games over Christmas is going to make a difference. But they are going to have to start picking up now, because teams like Bournemouth and Wolves are all sort of pulling away now from the pack at the bottom. So now you've got the bottom three, and then you've got Crystal Palace, Forest, and Everton are hitting form at the right time for them. They, of course, have Burnley on Saturday, and that's Sean Dyche going back to Turf Moor. That'll be an emotional day for him. But you can see if Forest don't start to putting wins together, they are going to be caught in that relegation fight. So they do have to start putting wins together. But they can. That's a good point away at Wolves.
Yes, absolutely, Paul, absolutely. We mentioned some of the games coming up for the weekend. It's going to be a big weekend for Steve Cooper and Nottingham Forest and all those teams in and around them this coming weekend as well. On to the final game of the weekend. It also took place on Saturday afternoon. Just want to give a big shout out to a friend of and colleague JB John Stuttard. I want to say absolutely fantastic commentary from JB on last Saturday afternoon on the Brighton against Burnley game. Fantastic goal he covered from Burnley. I've seen I've heard the commentary back and he's put it behind with the footage of the goal as well, and you can see his excitement in that goal. You also heard his excitement plus anger in the Brighton equaliser as well, and then comes into with him being a boyhood Burnley fan, but so you can understand where his anger comes from, Paul. But it's a good point for Burnley though, away at Brighton. Brighton a tough place to go, going well this season in eighth. Well, probably be further up now after the results of the weekend. Well, no, they still are eighth on goal difference from Newcastle, which will show the table in a moment. We're going to Brighton, getting a 1-1 draw, especially with how well they playing this season, especially in the Europa League as well. Going to Brighton getting a draw is not a bad result for Burnley, although JB said it was because of the Bournemouth and Sheffield United results. But going there, making sure you don't lose and come away with at least a point in that is a really good day for. You would probably say it's a really good performance, apart from the other two results in Sheffield United and Bournemouth, picking up all 3 points. That's probably only two downsides, which have not made that result at Brighton, what people would normally say, a good one.
Well, I have to say, let's look at the statistics to see whether or not Burnley should have got anything from that game. Now, in the first half, they played very well, did Burnley. I felt they were creating chances, maybe should have scored more than one. The second half, however, is an entirely different story. You're looking at somebody like James Trafford, who has just been absolutely amazing to keep Burnley in that game. James Trafford earned Burnley that point. Let's take a look at the statistics anyway. Burnley had 28% possession to the 72% that Brighton had. Now, the dominance doesn't just stop there. Burnley had 6 shots. Now, they had 3 on target, and of course, the one goal. Now, 29 shots for Brighton and Hove Albion, 11 of them on target. It's a significant difference. Looking at the passes, 777 for Brighton, 308 for Burnley. Touches on the ball, 979 for Brighton, 488. How Burnley come away with a point from that game is absolutely mind-boggling. I mean, it was when I was watching that game, Ross. I was first of all, I was mesmerised at James Trafford. I think that game is really going to help him with his confidence, and it's going to make him. It's that game. He's going to realise if he had any doubts before now, he's going to realise that he's got the ability to be a successful Premier League goalkeeper, and a very successful Premier League goalkeeper, in fact, because some of those saves were magnificent. But going back to the game as a whole, how Brighton didn't win that, I don't know. I have no idea how Brighton didn't win that game. It'll be one of the great mysteries of football. But I think the long and the short of it is, Burnley still have a lot of work to do. But a good first half performance by the Clarets. I felt in the first half they played very, very well.
Yes, and what we'll say, Paul, you say you don't know how Brighton didn't win that game. I can give you 2 names. James Trafford.
Oh yeah, that's it.
That's why Brighton didn't win that. James Trafford. Fantastic saves from the Brighton stopper, like from the Burnley stopper against to keep Brighton out of it. And probably like what you said, Paul, that'll probably give Trafford a bit of confidence now, probably give Burnley fans a bit of confidence going into the game at the weekend and rest of the season with James Trafford in goal. Because I know JB has not been the biggest fan of James Trafford over the past couple of days or so. And prior to this game, I can understand JB's reasonings. But I've always said to JB, sometimes when you're in a bad run of form, the goalkeeper is only as good as the defenders in front of him. And if he has a settled back line, which I know he's not really had much of this season because of injuries or what, suspensions, whatever. Once he has a settled back line in front of him, who plays there every single week, that's when you'll see the consistency from James Trafford. Once the defenders knows when Trafford's going to come for the ball, Trafford knows when the defender's going to clear it, so you don't have to panic. Those are the situations where you'll probably see Trafford build a bit more momentum building going forward and potentially try and help Burnley get out of that bottom three.
Yeah, I think it's a challenge. It's a massive challenge to get Burnley out of that situation, and I'm at this point where I just don't think they're good enough. But I think what I also don't believe in firing Vincent Kompany at this stage. It's always been stated that it's a long project at Burnley to get them to where the owner wants them to be, and that's to be in the Europa League. And you're playing European football. They've got a very young team. They may well go down to the Championship. If they can keep a lot of that team together, they may be able to build on that and build character and ability. And come the season, they may well get promoted back again into the Premier League and be even stronger.
Yes, let's just take a quick look at the table there. As we can see, Liverpool currently top of the Premier League standings on 37 points. As you can see, Everton deducted 10 points, as I've already mentioned. They'd be on 23 points and up in 10th if it wasn't for that, and they'd be above Chelsea and closing the gap to just a point behind West Ham, 3 behind Brighton and Newcastle, 4 behind Manchester United as well. So, table doesn't tell the whole story in terms of Everton, of where they are right now from where they should be if it wasn't for that 10-point deduction. New leaders at the top of the table though, Paul. Are you surprised that Liverpool are top of the table after this round of fixtures, after the performances that you've seen from Arsenal and the others in the league this weekend?
Not really. I think Liverpool have been in a rich vein of form. They've been performing extremely well, and I know they've got Manchester United at home on the weekend, and they will look at this as being a really, really good time to play United. But looking at the stats as well, and the form is 4 wins out of 5, and the only draw being the 1-1 draw against Manchester City. But look at they've been free-flowing in the goals. I mean, you just have to look at this. 12 goals in 5 games. They've conceded, in those 5 games, they've conceded 5 goals. So 12 goals in 5 games, 2.40 goals goals for. And the 5 goals that they've conceded in 12 games is a 0.41 goals against average. It's huge for Liverpool. They are in a rich vein of form. For Manchester United, well, they've got 5 goals in 5 games. That gives them obviously 1 goal, and 5 goals conceded in those 5 games. So again, one goal conceded in this case. They have kept a clean sheet in 2 of those games against Everton and Luton. But I think Manchester United at this point, they're gonna be up against it against Liverpool and Anfield for sure.
Yes, absolutely, Paul, and we'll be discussing that game in more detail at the week on Thursday evening for your listening pleasure. But thank you to Paul for joining us this evening. Thank you to those who's watched this as well. Thank you to Paul for joining us this afternoon. Myself and Paul will be back on Thursday evening to go through and preview game number 17 of the Premier League. Until then, we'll catch you again soon. Bye-bye.